I said that other teams across the National Football League are panicking, but that the Arizona Cardinals have something that those teams are looking for. And I want you to just take a moment. And we have said on this show today a lot of positivity about the Cardinals. Offenses over the last month, one of the best in the league. The coach and quarterback are rising up the boards when it comes to the betting markets for Coach of the Year and MVP. And now we're going to play a little game of compare and contrast with some other franchises in the NFL. So I want you to join me on this thought exercise. Take a look around in the NFL. Just take a look around some of the teams. Start with the Bears because they're in the news today, and they're a team that the Cardinals played recently. They just fired their offensive coordinator, and they have a number 1 overall pick quarterback that is struggling. And they, once again, drafted a quarterback and doesn't look like they set that quarterback up for success with the right coaching staff. And it feels like it is the Justin Fields situation all over again there in Chicago. So, fired the offensive coordinator, top pick quarterback struggling. That's the Bears. The Saints, I know they just won this past weekend, but they already have fired their head coach. They have an absolute cap disaster on their hands, a roster that is completely just all over the place, have no idea what that team is going to look like next year. The Jets, a complete dumpster fire, another team that the Cardinals have played, took care of business against both the Bears and the Jets. Already on another head coach. Basically have a lame duck GM who not really going to do a whole lot. A 41-year-old quarterback, or about to be 41-year-old quarterback, not playing particularly well, not going to make the playoffs. Complete dumpster fire. The Jaguars, they went out and they hired Doug Peterson because he was supposed to be the fix. Urban Meyer, it just didn't work out with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence not reaching his potential, being the number 1 overall pick, it was because Urban Meyer didn't have the right staff, didn't have the right structure. Doug Peterson, offensive guru, he's supposed to come in here and he's supposed to save things in Jacksonville. He's supposed to turn Trevor Lawrence around. How's that working out for him? How's that going in Jacksonville? The Dallas Cowboys. I could do a whole 2-hour show, 8 segments. We break up this show into 4 segments an hour, 8 segments. I could do 8 segments on the Dallas Cowboys and the mess that they are. It's a complete disaster. You have the owner who's also the GM. So really the only person who has any level of accountability is the coach, because they've given the quarterback the contract extension. They paid CeeDee Lamb. So the only accountability is going to come from the coach, who's more than likely not going to be there. You know who doesn't have any of the issues that we're talking about? You know who hasn't had to fire their offensive coordinator and they're ruining a number 1 overall pick? Do you know who hasn't already fired their head coach like the Saints, who's not a complete dumpster fire like the Jets? You know who's not like the Jaguars, who hired a head coach to kind of fix things, a franchise in transition, and didn't screw it up? You know who doesn't have those problems? You know who's not the Cowboys? That's right. The Arizona Cardinals are not any of those teams. They're not the Bears. They're not the Saints. They're not the Jets. They're not the Jags. They're not the Cowboys. They're none of those teams. They don't have a single thing in common with those franchises. The closest thing is the Jaguars, because the Jaguars drafted a quarterback, and it didn't work out with the coaching staff that they put in place with that quarterback, so they went a different direction with their head coach. They did it in a shorter window than the Cardinals did, but the Cardinals drafted Kyler Murray. It didn't work out with Cliff, and they needed to make a pivot. Now, their change came with also a GM change, but that's the closest thing. But guess what? The Cardinals are night and day where the Jaguars are right now. Night and day. Do you want to know why the Cardinals don't have any of these issues? Do you want to know why the Cardinals aren't the Bears? Do you want to know why the Cardinals aren't the Saints, the Jets, the Jaguars, the Cowboys? Because they have the most important commodity that you can have in sports: stability. They have stability. Do the Bears have stability? Been changing coaches and offensive play callers and quarterbacks and GMs. Do they have stability? Do the Saints have stability, constantly needing to turn over their roster? Yeah, they've had the same GM for a long time. And yeah, they haven't had a lot of coaching turnover, but they have a lot of roster turnover. So not a lot of stability. Do I even need to ask if the Jets have stability? Changing play callers and coaches and quarterbacks and GMs and just brutal. The Jags aren't known stability. They've been trying to get that right forever. They've been trying to get that right since Byron Leftwich was there playing quarterback for them. The Cowboys, really? Stability with the Dallas Cowboys? The Arizona Cardinals right now have the most important commodity that you can have in sports: stability. One could make the case that it's more important than having talent, having organizational stability. You have a GM and a head coach that were brought in at the same time. They agree on the direction and the vision for the team. They are working in unison for that vision, for that direction. They have been given the room, the resources, the ability to work towards that goal. And when you have that commodity of stability, you can set a culture. You can have a next man up mentality that is so successful the way that it is right now for the Arizona Cardinals, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. Because players pay attention to this stuff. When players see organizational stability, when they see an owner not getting in the way of a GM and a head coach, when they see a GM and a head coach on the same page, when they see a head coach and a coaching staff that's given the resources, the room, the ability to instill what they need to instill, it provides stability for those players. If you're a player and you walk into a situation and you know that the GM's not for long, you know the coach isn't for long, you know that the owner is going to meddle, how do you buy into the message that's being sold by your GM? How do you buy into the message that's being sold by your head coach, by your position coach? You can't, because you know that you're going to probably outlast those guys. You're going to be here longer than those guys. And let's be honest, the ownership of this team hasn't changed. Michael Bidwell, the owner of this team, has been criticized at length in this market for the issues that this team has had. He's made mistakes in the past. He hasn't been above criticism. He's been criticized. He hasn't gone anywhere. But at the end of the day, when you get it right, when you hire the right people, it masks a lot of those quote-unquote issues that you might have with ownership. The New York Knicks are a laughingstock in New York for the longest time because of their owner, because of James Dolan. He hasn't gone away. He hasn't changed things. But he hired the right person in Leon Rose. He hired the right coach in Tom Thibodeau. And now they're a team that's being talked about in a good light in the NBA. But the owner didn't change. All the owner that was criticized for meddling and getting involved and making mistakes and being a problem, he didn't go anywhere. But when you hire the right people, it can change an entire organization. And Michael Bidwell has hired the right people. Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon have been given the room and the ability to set their culture, and the players recognize that they've been given that stability. And so the Arizona Cardinals, I don't know what the rest of the season is going to look like. I don't know how it's going to end. But what I do know is they have a commodity that other teams long for. They have what's going to go into 3 years of stability. And there's no upheaval. There's no question mark about the coach and GM at the end of the year. They are given the runway to make this work. They've got to do it, but they have been given the runway to make this work.